As we track the market open this Monday morning, February 23rd, the 10-year Treasury yield is hovering around 4.07%. The markets are scrambling to react to a massive Supreme Court ruling that just upended the government's trade policy. But while Washington fights over legality, the national debt has quietly climbed to over 38.5 trillion. Today, we're looking at the real-world impact of these high-level games on your wallet, from the cost of your groceries to the hidden tax you're still paying. As of early February 2026, the total gross of national debt has hit the 38.56 trillion. So to put that in perspective, that is roughly $286,000 for every single household in America. Over the past year, the debt has increased at a staggering rate of about 6.4 billion every single day. And here's the reality that neither party wants to talk about. A debt of $286,000 per household is not a macroeconomic statistic. It is a massive weight on our future. The government is currently spending 6.4 billion a day that they do not have. I don't care which party is in the White House or who controls the Senate. The fact is that we are financially lifestyle that we cannot afford on the back of American taxpayers. They tell us that the economy is strong, but you cannot call a system strong when it requires 4 million of new debt every single minute just to keep the lights on. So on Friday, the Supreme Court struck down the administration's use of emergency powers to impose broad, across-the-board tariffs. Reading that only Congress has the constitutional power to levy taxes and tariffs. So this decision effectively raises nearly 3/4 of the new tax revenue the government hoped to collect. However, that while the 160 billion in illegal tariff must be addressed, other specific trade penalties remain in place. So this ruling is a win for the Constitution. But let's look at the reality for your wallet. Even with this ruling, the tariff has stayed in place are still expected to cost the average U.S. household $400 this year. We have been living through a period where the executive branch tried to bypass the law to hike the tax on consumers under the guise of trade policy. The government isn't doing enough to lower costs. In fact, they've been actively fighting to keep these hidden taxes in place until the courts stepped in. It's a systemic overreach that hits you every time you buy a car or appliance. The 2026 State of the Restaurant Industry Report was just released, projecting sales to hit the 1.55 trillion. But that's mostly driven by prices hikes, not more customers. In fact, real inflation-adjusted growth is a measly 1.3%, and 70% of consumers says that they want to eat out more, but simply don't have the money to do it. This is exactly what I mean when I say the government is out of touch. They point to record sales numbers in the service industry as a sign of consumer resilience. But look at the facts. Sales are only up because the prices are sky high. The average person is being squished out of even the small joy of a meal out. Only 42% of the restaurant operators were even profitable last year. So we're watching a slow motion of death loop where the consumer cannot afford to pay and the owner cannot afford to stay open. So this isn't a theory. It's the reality of the economy where basic costs are outrunning the wages. The Congressional Budget Office CBO now forecasts that the federal deficit will hit the 1.9 trillion that fiscal year. More alarmingly, net interest payments on the debt are now expected to consume nearly 14% of the entire federal budget. Think about that. 14 cents of every single dollar the government spends goes to paying interest on money that they already have spent. That is money that isn't going to the infrastructure, and it's not going to healthcare, and it's not staying in your pocket. So both parties have let the interest bill spiral out of control while they argue over optics. The reality is that the government is now a debt service machine that happens to run a country on the side. They're not doing enough because they cannot do enough as long as they are buried under 38 trillion in debt. So watch for the news on when the government will refund the 160 billion in illegal tariffs. Don't expect it to be fast or easy. March 11 CPI. This will be the big test to see if the Supreme Court ruling actually starts lowering prices at the retail level. Treasury actions. Keep an eye on the bid to cover ratios. If demand for US debt drops, interest rates and your mortgage will stay high. The reality is simple. The government is playing with trillions while you are struggling with hundreds. Whether it's illegal. Thank you for watching.